Good afternoon. Greetings to everybody, in particular to the next candidate for the position of a judge of the Constitutional Court of Ukraine. Today, the advisory group of experts continues with conducting interviews with the candidates, and we have now the candidate, Madam Yuliia Nikolaevna Kyrychenko, a senior lawyer at LLC Lex4, a private entrepreneur in the field of law, has been admitted to the competitive selection process by the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. The interview will be moderated by the secretary of the AGE, Mr. Yaroslav Romaniuk, to whom I'm giving the floor. Please, Yaroslav.
Дякую, пане голово.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Greetings, dear colleagues. Greetings, Ms. Yuliia Nikolaevna. All 6 AG members are present here. The chairman of the AGE, Mr. Alex Zalar, he is present online in the interview with you. And physically, we have present here Ms. Hanna Sochotska, Ms. Maureen O'Connor, Ms. Natalia Kuznetsova, Ms. Oksana Vasilchenko. AG deputy members are also in attendance, namely Thomas Griffith, Richard Barrett, Marek Zubik, Vasil Shakun, Volodymyr Kuzmenko, and myself, the AG secretary, Yaroslav Romaniuk. Ms. Yuliia Nikolaevna, we have accumulated a lot of information about your candidacy. We have found a lot of positive things, but there are some things to clarify. Maybe somebody has any doubts regarding your good moral character that are required for the position of a judge of the Constitutional Court of Ukraine. That's why the goal of this interview is to provide you with the possibility to clarify any doubts and issues that we have. Please also note that the candidate may not provide information, documents, and other materials during the interview if the advisory group requested their provision earlier and the candidate did not provide them within the specific period, or if the candidate could provide them on their own initiative earlier. However, the advisory group may make an exception if it determines that such an exception is justified. I also would like to inform you that the interview is being recorded and streamed live on the AGE resources as well as on the website of the Constitutional Court of Ukraine. Therefore, I call upon the AGE members and the candidate to limit the use of sensitive data and limited access information on live air. If there is a need to talk about vulnerable data, the streaming will be suspended and restricted, and we will discuss it without live streaming. Dear candidate, I would also like to draw your attention to the fact that the duration of the interview is approximately 1 hour. The time limit for the response to a question is 3 minutes, so please be laconic, precise, and concise. The advisory group members, some of them are English-speaking, so please, if you need, you can use the headset with simultaneous interpretation. The blue light on the headset means Ukrainian channel, so if you need, please use it. Also, I would like to mention that at the end of the interview, you may make a short closing statement up to 5 minutes. So now I pass the floor to the rapporteurs, Ms. Sochotska and Ms.
So it is exactly our question to ask you some, how to say, clearance concerning what you said in the writing answer to our question. Your first job, immediately after university, was a senior consultant at the Legal Expertise Department of the Secretariat of the Constitutional Court of Ukraine. How did you get this position? Could you explain us more?
Thank you, esteemed Ms. Hanna. So I graduated from the university in 1999, and the Secretariat of the Constitutional Court of Ukraine at that period wasn't completed with the staff, so the Constitutional Court functioned only first years. That's why two professors, my professors of the theory of state and law and constitutional law of foreign countries, they became judges of the Constitutional Court of Ukraine. Professor Mykola Kozubra was my scientific advisor, and I made a research about the defense of right, and I was informed about a vacancy, and Professor Mykola Kozubra advised me to submit my candidacy, as in his view I could enhance the legal expertise department. I submitted my documents and I was taken on a probation term, and I succeeded and stayed to work on this position.
Yes, but at the time of starting your work at the Constitutional Court, your future husband's father was also a judge at the Constitutional Court of Ukraine. In response to the question from our group, you explained that you knew your husband from school. Explain whether your future husband's father helped you also, besides the professors, as you said, with employment of the Constitutional Court of Ukraine, yes, when he was a judge and your professor was judge. So.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this question, Ms. Hanna. So the answer is no. My future father-in-law, because at the moment, at the time of starting my work at the Secretariat of the Constitutional Court of Ukraine, I wasn't married, so he didn't favor and didn't help me with my employment. I am not maybe very modest, but I was one of the best students of this graduation year, and I think that I obtained this position because of my participation in scientific conferences. Moreover, I would like to say that Professor Volodymyr Shapoval, he's remarkable constitutionalist, and he's very principled person, so I think that it even didn't help.
Yes, exactly. It's a very well-known name because he was also one of drafter of the draft of the Constitution. Yes, Shapoval draft, as you remember, probably it was he. And now in 2001, you were appointed as the chief consultant of the Legal Expertise Department of the Secretariat, and then the scientific consultant to a judge of the Constitutional Court of Ukraine. And it was the same situation, probably, as you explained, yes? We have a question. It's your future husband's father, how to say, influence and help you in making this new promotion in the Constitutional Court. Maybe he knew you better than.
Well, thank you for your question. I worked in the Secretariat of the Constitutional Court of Ukraine in the Legal Expertise Directorate, and our department was doing the expertise in cases on which the proceedings were open already. And my direct manager was Mykola Chayun, the head of the legal expertise and the head of the Secretariat. So with the incumbent judges, I have never come across with incumbent judges, and with my today's father-in-law, I think maybe he just acted that way. I don't know. The judges of the Constitutional Court of Ukraine, they get the internal expertise in the written form from the internal form, and in some of the cases, the judge may wanted to communicate orally with expert, but the judge Vladimir Shapoval, I have never come across him. Have never come across this judge. And since I prepared the expertise in a very efficient way, my management, promoted me. And then further on, that's why I have become, unfortunately, Alexander Mironenko is not with us anymore, but I'm very happy that he suggested me to become a scientific consultant. I have never known the judge Mironenko until the moment when he offered me the position of the scientific consultant. And the judge has explained it in the way that he liked very much the decision that was on his case. He took a look at those who were the authors of it, and he checked my profile. And since he wanted to go back to the scientific activities, he wanted the scientific consultant from the Secretariat who has the experience of preparing the research and writing decisions of the analysis of the cases.
Yulia
Mykolaievna, allow me to continue. From 2007 to 2017, you were employed at the Supreme Court of Ukraine. And in your motivation letter, you indicate that during this time you dealt with the matters related to constitutional submissions from the judicial branch of power. Could you give a more detailed examples of the constitutional submissions that you have submitted? I have worked in the apparatus of the chair of the Supreme Court of Ukraine, and when the chair of the Supreme Court has offered me this position, I told him that I was no specialist on the judicial branch of power. But he said that there is the question of the constitutionality, and that they were approving the decision to go from the Supreme Court to the Constitutional Court, and he wanted to have in his composition the specialist who would advise him whether or not. No, the question was different. Which submissions did you work on? Okay. I can't even remember exactly, because many questions that were asked by the chair, I did not advise to go to the Constitutional Court, for example, because I didn't see the necessity. According to the procedure, when considering the cases, the lower courts could not refer to the Constitutional Court directly. They have to go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court can make the decision whether they see the doubts on the constitutionality of whether or not to refer. And the majority of the cases were like this. And we did not prepare the submissions or send them to the Constitutional Court of Ukraine. If analyzed the times back then, I think there are very few submissions from the Supreme Court. I can't give you the exact number. Yulia Mykolaievna, as of 2006, you are the expert of the Center of Political and Legal Reforms. So, in your opinion, to be the expert and to be expert at the Center of Political and Legal Reforms and an assistant to the chairman of the Supreme Court, can they be both done? Well, actually not, but before this decision was made for me to hold or not this position, I have discussed this, because it's the Center for Political and Legal Reforms. It's an independent analytical center, and it only refers to the public activity. So that's why there was no, in my opinion, conflict of interest or issues, both in the Center for Political and Legal Reforms or in the Supreme Court. And I have discussed this clearly with the management, and I worked on the constitutional law there and certain draft laws, and I have consulted the Center for Political and Legal Reforms on the constitutional law. Did you receive income from the Center for Political and Legal Reforms during the period in parallel? No, this was public activity. I did not get income. Only when I moved completely to work in the center, and I have become the subject of entrepreneurship activity as of 2017, I started gaining incomes or fees for the work I do in the framework of the projects, and usually it's the technical assistance of the project. So according to the information that the Secretariat has collected, there are grounds to consider that in 2015 and 2016 you got income up to 100,000 hryvnias and 221,000 from the Center for Political and Legal Reforms under civil law contracts. Actually, I asked the center whether or not I had civil law contracts since the time has passed, and I did not remember. But the information that was provided for me, no, they weren't. So I participate a lot in projects, but even if they were, but these were the scientific activity, because it always also seemed to me that perhaps they had contracts concluded with me on the scientific activity, but there is no conflict with the civil service for sure. I see. Allow me please to follow up this block of questions. During the written round of questions, you were asked about the value of Jeep Grand Cherokee that belongs to your husband, and we asked you to take all the measures to find out the divergency in the price of this car that belongs to your husband as of 2016. And he specified the price is 1,300,000 hryvnias, but according to the information from the Unified State Register of Vehicles, the value of this passenger car is 149,000 hryvnias. So did you manage to take all the measures and obtain information from your husband? Thank you, Madam Oksana. Yes, I did. We wanted to buy the car, Grand Cherokee, with 150,000 hryvnias. We really wanted, but we didn't get lucky. So my husband specified the real price of it. I prepared the screenshots of the announcements, and this is the real price or value of the car. My husband bought this car, that's why this is the true info. As for the purchase and sale agreement that could confirm this, the husband remembered these events. He used, some intermediaries via whom this car was re-registered for my husband, and he got the technical passport, and the technical passport is the proof or confirmation of the right of ownership, so he did not have the agreement. But we think that us as the seller, we have the obligation to pay taxes. As the buyer, but maybe the seller was not conscientious and he specified incorrect information. Okay, thank you, we heard you.
Thank you for your explanations, but we need also some clarification. I think I would like to be back because the car, I think you answered the question, but I would like to clarify some answer you give before concerning your scientific work, because as you said, your work in the Center for Political and Legal Reforms can be considered as scientific activity. I would like to know how you describe scientific activity. Exactly the work in NGO could be classified as scientific activity. One can make some doubts, yes? What was your exactly work in this organization? That question put by Ms. Oksana, but I would like to deeper clarify the issue.
This center is a non-classic, human rights organization. It's just that in Ukrainian legislation we cannot organize or register it as think tank. So a lot of work in this center is analytical or similar to scientific activity. Well, for example, per request of the judges of the Constitutional Court, I provide the conclusions. Well, not me, but the team, my colleagues, we together provide conclusions per request of the judges of the Constitutional Court. Well, for example, it's cooperation with the committees, parliamentary committees, mainly the Committee on Legal Policy, when they apply with questions whether or not there are doubts on the constitutionality of on certain draft laws that are considered by the committee. So this is probably analytical, but very similar to scientific.
Analytical and scientific, and you describe it as scientific work, scientific activity. If you would say that it was a kind of analytic, it would be maybe much more clear, and defining it as scientific, and you are not, how to say, engaged in any scientific institutions, yes, can involve some doubts, yes, and I see that probably you also see this kind of delicacy in this issue. Yes.
Да, я повністю погоджуюся.
Yes, I completely agree. Perhaps I wasn't clear. It's the analytical expert work more.
In the work in the Supreme Court at the same time. Yes, as Madam Oksana asked you, and you combine the work in both institutions at the same time. Supreme Court and the legal, how it was done, and the legal center for political reforms.
In the center of the political legal reforms, it was not my work, it was my calling, because there I worked protecting the constitutional authority, constitution, and I think it was my public activity. I came there after 6 p.m. The office was very nearby, and so I worked after 6 p.m. I didn't even work. I just, wanted to make the contribution for our mission that we have defined in the Center for Political and Legal Reforms. That's the movement of Ukraine to the EU. And I still think that I make lots of efforts on free base in order to consolidate the civil society organizations, because I have the clear position that our democracy that is not viable without the strong CSO.
You repeated that you didn't receive income from the Center for Political and Legal Reforms, that it was your work totally voluntary.
Не зараз.
Well, not now, but before 2017.
15, 16, how was your work, yes, then?
Let me ask you a question. Was there any overlap between what you were doing on a pro bono or voluntary basis at the Center for Political and Legal Reforms with your role with the Supreme Court?
Ні, дублювання жодним чином не було.
There was no overlapping, because it's a completely different activity of the Supreme Court and the activity in the Center for Political and Legal Reforms. Because during the strategic sessions, we were defining in which directions we can join in for capacity building. And so...
Hey, wait a minute. You did that at the think tank, the capacity building and direction.
Well, maybe not capacity building of the institution, not of the Center for Political Legal Reforms, even though I was part of that as well, but mainly from the point of view of independent analytical center. I was facilitating the capacity building of, in Ukraine. Well, for example, referrals to the independent bodies, we would give the expertise. We had our own projects when we think, I can give you a real case. Like for now, there is a threat of use of the manipulative referendum legislation. You have to clearly define and defend the manipulative legislation on the referendums, because we see a threat to sovereignty of Ukraine or statehood of Ukraine because of this law. So we couldn't just sleep peacefully knowing that this was going on, that the Russian Federation can kill your state because of the referendum that they can hold when there will be the constitution written by Moscow.
So,
Madam Kyrychenko, may I ask you a question, please? Look, we want to clarify with you a very important issue, and that is whether you received, under the civil law contract, certain income at the time when you already served at the Supreme Court. The problem is that you are claiming that you haven't received anything before 2017. However, we have the information from the state register of individual taxpayers in the year 2015 and 2016 that you received income under civil law contracts, so not the income as a state servant at the Supreme Court. And this was in amount of 100,000 Ukrainian hryvnias in the year 2015 and 221,000 hryvnias in the year 2016. So you probably know that this is in conflict with the applicable law on prevention of corruption with respect to incompatibility of functions. So how do you explain this?
Да, дякую.
Yes, thank you for your question. Indeed, I just have worked in the center for quite a while. Maybe I forgot, but I applied for the center to clarify whether or not there were the civil law contracts at that time, but maybe they didn't do the proper documentation, but they don't have it. But I think there's no conflict in the part of the corruption risks, since this was the civil agreement, and in my opinion it didn't cause any conflict. The taxes were paid, and it's in no conflict with my functions that I fulfilled as the as working in the Supreme Court. So the person who is doing the civil service has no right to do any other paid activity. Yes, but I think that it was specified in the contract that this was the scientific work, but we have just clarified this is rather analytical work, not scientific work. Yulia Mykolaievna, we have just found out that as of 2007 until 2017, you held the position of the assistant to the chairman of the Supreme Court of Ukraine, and there you worked very persistently on the documents.
Up to 18 p.m. and after it you worked in the Center of Political and Legal Reforms. And as I was the head of the Supreme Court of Ukraine in that period, why I don't know you? Because I was the assistant at the Vasil Vasilovich Onopenko. If you see that since 2014 I was on maternity leave. Which years? Since 2014. Ostap Shapoval is my son, whom I gave birth in summer 2014. So, but since May 2013, I was the head of the Supreme Court, and I don't know you. But before the delivery of the baby, I have a maternity leave. So you were on maternity leave. Okay. Then, in that case, in the Supreme Court, you were on the maternity leave, but as we see that you continued to work in the year 2015, 2016 with the civil legal agreements in the center. So you remained civil servants, even on maternity leave, but you obtained income. In the center of political legal reforms. So I considered it like scientific activity, and I thought that there was no clash of interests.
It was rather analytical activity as not scientific activity. Now our discussion going in this direction that we should clearly define that work in the legal center was not scientific activity because you had no ground to work as scientific research, yes, only to make a kind of analytics, yes. So, but I think that it is there are some how to say doubts which are not very and very good way explained by you, yes. So. No, we can agree. And the last question, probably Oksana, yes? Maybe, I don't know. No, we should.
I'm looking at the, according to Article 1 of the Law of Ukraine, quote, on scientific and scientific technical activity. Scientific activity is intellectual creative activity aimed at obtaining new knowledge and or finding ways of its application, the main types of which are fundamental and applied scientific research. What I hear you saying is that you analyzed legislation, laws, constitution, maybe did comparative analysis with other countries' constitutions. Is that, am I on the right track here with that? I want to know how what you did fits that definition. What you did at the Center for Political and Legal Reforms, how does that activity there fit the definition of Article 1 of the Law of Ukraine?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your question, Ms. Marin. The Center for Political and Legal Reforms had projects regarding some research and some monographic publishing about corporate analysis, rule of law and law in European countries and in other democratic countries. So there was research about the context of issues and problems that take place in Ukraine and to provide recommendation to the authorities, maybe to the parliament, to legislative branch, how to resolve this issue and how to address these issues better. Very often when you...
Who requested that the Center for Political and Legal Reforms, who assigned you or contracted with you to do these various projects and research and analytical, I'm presuming you produced papers and documents that answered their questions and gave them direction. And when I say them, I mean people and entities that hired you. Could have been the legislature, could have been independent groups that want to be informed, and no, they had to be a government? Okay.
No. Look, the Center for Political and Legal Reforms deals with its own projects, and then there are international competitions. For example, if it is my blog, it's about rule of law. And we submit our grant application. If it wins, we obtain some support. It can be from the European Union, it can be from some embassy of, I don't know, Germany or some other country, or from international organization that builds up rule of law in Ukraine. And then we have our own project that is implemented by the Center for Political and Legal Reforms, and the head of the project designs the plan of the implementation of this plan according to the tasks stated and according to the results to be achieved. And then there is reporting. And separately, well, it's not about the project activity, as the Center for Political and Legal Reforms is quite a well-known institution even for authorities. We have requests. It's not our initiative to work on it, but in my direction, this is about the Constitutional Court of Ukraine and Parliament.
Юлія Миколаївна, можливо,
Miss Yuliia Mykolaivna, maybe the scientific activity, it was your postgraduate program at the National Academy of Public Administration under the President of Ukraine on November 15, 2005. It's written on the site for Center for Political Legal Reforms. It is written that you also have that you were in postgraduate program. So can you tell us about the period, about this? So I enrolled to the postgraduate program full-time after termination of my activity as scientific advisor of the Constitutional Court of Ukraine, because there was a crisis in the Constitutional Court of Ukraine, and I thought that my internal values did not give me a possibility just to work on this position when the Constitutional Court is not in its full composition, and there was blockage of the activity of the Constitutional Court for 9 years. So I took this decision that I can't just come to my work and obtain remuneration when the court isn't functionable and nobody asks me to do something, because the cadency of my judge was finished and new judges were not appointed. So that's why I quit and I enrolled to the postgraduate program full-time in the National Academy of Public Administration under the President of Ukraine. And I think also so my intention was to enhance my education, but my priority has always been practical activity. So in 2 months I was invited for the Secretariat of the President of Ukraine, Yushchenko, as the deputy of the department, the head of the department for political reform. So I took another decision that this is more interesting for me and my skills are more useful here for the state. And I transferred there. Transferred, you mean from full-time to correspondence course? Yes. And then, and after, I respect people who can provide scientific research being with some practical duties, but I couldn't combine it, and that's why I finished. So I graduated from postgraduate program, but I wasn't able to finish my dissertation because I worked a lot in the Secretariat of the President, and I gave the priority to this civil service. So it was budget funded or private funded? No, it was budget funded education, but when it was full-time education, I didn't obtain any fees, any payments from the university. Miss Yuliia, I would like to return to your work in the Supreme Court of Ukraine. In December 2011, Petro Polepchuk was the head, and I was the first deputy of the Supreme Court. The head distributed the tasks, and I was in charge of the fixation of constitutional statements. So I remember what were the results. I remember why there were some refusals. And that's why the same question. Why I don't know you? I understood. I worked only with the head of the Supreme Court head, Vasil Vasilovich Onopenko. But he was not the head of Supreme Court since 2019, and you quit in 2017, 6 years. Why we don't know you? Thank you. Thank you. But I have 2 children. And I had maternity leave with my first son also. And then I took maternity leave with my second son. So it's no. So whether do you have enough professional background if for quite a long period you stayed on maternity leave educating your child, whether you have sufficient professional background? Thank you for your question. I think that I have enough professional background because if you research my public activity, my research since 2011, then you will see that I have published a lot of analytic data and a lot of articles, a lot of materials and papers from the Center for Political and Legal Reforms, where I am an author or a co-author. So you haven't worked in Supreme Court, but because you were on maternity leave, but you performed duties in your active public activity, and you prepared a lot of analytic statements. Yes, I could do it because I shouldn't be from 9 to 6 at civil service. So I could combine it. I could do it when my child was sleeping, and it was my belief that if I have time, I should be involved in the implementing of the mission for the Center for Political and Legal Reforms. Thank you. Thank you for your answer. Are there any other questions for the candidate? Mr. Richard Barrett.
One question, Mrs. Yuliia, just to clarify, because I'm a little uncertain about how things operate in Ukraine, of course. So you described the work you did for the Centre for Political and Legal Reforms, and that is very valuable work in any society. And can you explain whether the project work was published? Was it published for the society at large? It was on websites and in books and so on. It was public work. Just have you any concerns that if you were fortunate enough to be and privileged enough to become a member of the Constitutional Court, that there might be some incompatibility between views you expressed or your colleagues expressed years ago and an issue, a rule of law issue that comes up in the future? Would there be any embarrassment, or how would you deal with that question?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Yes, when we talk about the Center for Political and Legal Reforms, one of its principles is publicity. So all the research and surveys, sometimes because of security issues, we do not publish. But as for project activity, all the results are public or are on our website. You can find out this website, and a lot of them are in English also. Mr. Vasil Shakun, please. Miss Yuliia, you said one phrase. You prepared scientific conclusions for the request of the judges of the Constitutional Court. I would like to ask you how the Constitutional Court or the Supreme Court, you said that these were judges of the Constitutional Court and the Supreme Court, how these both bodies compensated and reimbursed your titanic efforts. Thank you for mentioning these titanic efforts. So Supreme Court judges do not address the Center for Political and Legal Reforms in constitutional norm, but you said it. Maybe it was a technical error. I didn't want to let you down, but the judges of the Constitutional Court of this cadence, of the previous cadence, they addressed the Center for Political and Legal Reforms, and even in some descriptions for some decisions, the authors, the answers were provided by, and also in this list there was the Center for Political and Legal Reforms. And we think this is our duty. If we have experts, this is our duty and this is our honor to present answers to judges of the Constitutional Court. And our scientists know that the Constitutional Court, I have never heard that they give any reimbursements for answers. Are there any other questions for the candidate? If there are no other questions, before wrapping up, you are given 5 minutes to deliver a closing statement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Yaroslav. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the advisory group of experts, to international experts, because we have a historic moment when through the competition we can fill in 5 vacancies in the Constitutional Court of Ukraine for the better efficiency. So thank you so much that you agreed in such a transitional period to support Ukrainian democracy and get involved into this work during the martial law, and express my sincere gratitude to national experts and national lawyers. Since 2014, I have been advocating the selection procedure and this inserting of this evaluating criteria to the procedure. So, it's my honor to take part into such a procedure. And as I represent the public society, I will take this opportunity. And there is recording and there is streaming, and a lot of my colleagues from public society are watching it. So on behalf of the Center for Political and Legal Reforms, due to our multi-year experience, Yuri Barabash and Serhiy Riznik, we support them. And for rehabilitation package of reform, this coalition supported Serhiy Riznik, and we think that these are independent, with good image specialists in law that can enhance the composition of the Constitutional Court of Ukraine. In my closing remark, I would say that my main motivation for my professional career was to serve the public interest, and I wanted to defend the constitutionality in Ukraine. I hoped I managed to organize in the Independent Center in this regard. In my beliefs, I am confident that my inner values will be able to defend the oscillating and fighting democracy for today, and will introduce enhancement to the Constitutional Court of Ukraine, because I think after our military victory, we will face a lot of conflict moments and possibility of political crisis, where the Constitutional Court should be very reasonable to understand all the geopolitical situation to preserve our democracy. I will remind you that our young democracy fights with a totalitarian regime with big capacities. So that's why I think I can also represent my strengths, part of my strengths with my colleagues into the Constitutional Court. This was my motivation. Thank you so much for the interview, and I wish to Ukrainian people to have strong, independent constitutional court that will be able to make the power undergo the constitution. Thank you so much for your answers.
I announce the interview with the candidate for the position of the judge of the Constitutional Court of Ukraine, Kyrychenko Yuliia Mykolaievna, over.